Welcome to this week's episode. We are going to talk about pressure. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it part of the experience of being a business owner? Or do we actually have a choice in the matter? Maybe we should just make peace with it and accept that feeling pressure as an entrepreneur is just part of the territory, right? That is what I want to talk to you about today because I have some thoughts about the subject of pressure. Now, we all experience pressure, right? Pressure can come in many different shapes and sizes, and we all deal a little bit differently with pressure. Some of us seem to handle it better than others, and perhaps you are in that camp, right? That camp of owners that even say things like, you know what, I actually work better under pressure. I definitely used to fall into that group. I actually loved pressure. I loved the pressure of a deadline. And I would even put things off until the last minute. And then there would be this mad dash, right, to the finish line to make sure that everything is completed, often completing the work just in time. And this kind of pressure can and does help us to get things done faster, right? It forces us into action. It actually speeds us up. And sometimes we're even surprised at how much we can actually get done in a very short amount of time. So pressure isn't always a bad thing. But the thing is, we cannot live in this kind of pressure consistently, right? Because firstly, it's exhausting and also it's unhealthy. And if we stay here too long, it creates the exact opposite of what we want for ourselves. It threatens everything that we've built. Now, pressure doesn't present itself in the same way for all of us. For some of us, pressure speeds us up, like I said, and it will show up as overworking, that sense of like just pushing, working harder, right? Maybe even micromanaging or obsessively monitoring things, especially if you have a team. Now, for some of us, it actually slows us down and we tend to isolate ourselves and maybe procrastinate. And there is almost like this sense of losing our motivation and our creativity. Now, also, for some of us, it's a little bit of both, right? Now, there is something that triggers the pressure, and it can be the, constant client deadlines and feeling like we're always on the back foot. Like there's so many things. It can be the bills we need to pay, the interest rate that has spiked, and now all of a sudden that bond payment is almost double what it used to be. It can be the pressure of work-life balance, right? And feeling like you're not spending enough time with your kids and your family and, the other things that you want to do in your life. The pressure can also be not wanting to disappoint people, right? The pressure of keeping it all together. And let's face it, some of us are really, really good at keeping it all together, like, right? Until we're just not keeping it all together anymore. Have you ever considered where the pressure actually comes from? Like, why is it there, right? And you might be saying, well, duh, it is, the circumstances. It's those client deadlines. It's the bills. It's the thing with my kid at school, right? And sure, those things are real and they feel like they are the reason why we have the pressure, but they are not the thing that creates the pressure inside of us. So pressure is actually created by our thoughts, right? The client deadline, the kids, the school thing, the supplier payments, the bond payments, all those circumstances, those things are actually quite neutral. The thing that adds the pressure is our thoughts about the circumstance, right? Our thoughts, our stories that we're telling ourselves about the client deadline, about the bills, and the whatever else it is that we think is creating the pressure. More specifically, we are actually giving meaning to the situation and ourselves inside of the situation. We're saying to ourselves that, you know what, if I don't meet this deadline, then it means that I have failed. We're saying that if I miss that soccer game or that swim lesson, then it means that I'm a bad mom. And that's the meaning, that story, that is creating the pressure, right? Now, once we have the awareness, once we understand that pressure is optional, we can make a change. Now, up until today, you may have believed that, wait a minute, pressure is just the name of the game, that, it's just life. But now that you know you have a choice, things can be different for you. You have the option of telling yourself a different story. And if you're feeling pressure, you now have the option of letting it go. It doesn't mean that the client deadline isn't still there, right? It doesn't mean that the kid soccer game isn't still happening and you have to make a choice between, work and going to the game, maybe. Those things are all there, right? It simply means that you're not going to blame that thing for the pressure anymore, because it's not the deadline that's creating the pressure. It's not the circumstance, right? So once we understand that, we can question the story that we're telling ourselves about the thing, about the circumstance, and we get to choose whether that story is helpful in creating the life and the business that we want to create. And if it is not, then we can choose different. So let me give you an example of how our stories or our thoughts impact how we feel. Let's look at the looming client deadline as an example. If you have a deadline for a client, you can choose to tell yourself, you know what, if I don't meet this deadline, they are going to be disappointed and I might even lose their business. My reputation is going to be damaged and I can't afford to let that happen. Everything depends on this. This creates a lot of pressure, right? It creates a lot of overwhelm, a lot of anxiety, and it doesn't feel good. So it's very obvious that it's the kind of pressure that isn't actually driving us to take intentional action. We can choose to tell ourselves a different story around the same scenario. So the client deadline is still there, right? But we can now choose to tell ourselves that this is actually an opportunity for me to showcase my reliability, my skills. And yes, meeting this deadline is important, and I choose to meet the deadline, right? I'm going to stick to the deadline. But I have planned my steps and I trust in my ability to deliver quality work on time because I show up and I'm resourceful and I do the things that I need to do in order to get it done. And I also remind myself, you know what, that every single step that I take towards this outcome is going to take me closer to it, right? So you can see how this kind of story doesn't make you feel like you want to go sit in a corner and cry, right? It makes you want to actually take action inside of your business. But it's not coming from that like desperate energy that creates a lot of anxiety and overwhelm. It actually feels very empowering because we don't want to be blasé about deadlines. We don't want to be blasé about the things that actually need to happen in our businesses, right? We just want to create calm and focus around the situation rather than anxiety and overwhelm. And it's very obvious if you look at the two examples, which one feels better, right? And which one you want to choose. Now, we can hit the deadline without the pressure. We can pay the bills and grow our businesses without the pressure. It all starts with the story we are choosing to focus on, and then teaching ourselves to tell and believe better stories about the circumstances in our lives and in our businesses. And this really is a skill, right? It's a muscle that we need to build because we're in the habit right now of telling ourselves some shitty stories, and that creates a lot of pressure. And so, anytime or every time you feel pressure, there is actually an opportunity for you to flex that muscle. It's an opportunity to choose different. Being a business owner is a choice, right? We don't have to do this. And even though we believe that we don't have a choice, we actually do. There are other options. We just don't like those options. And so we choose entrepreneurship. We choose to build businesses. And we get to choose just in the same way as we choose to build a business or, get a full-time job. We get to choose whether we want to incorporate business or pressure into the situation, right? We do have that choice. Now, I have created a free resource called the Pressure Protocol, and it is a step-by-step guide that you can follow to reduce the pressure you feel in any given moment, and so that you can start building the habit of thinking different thoughts and telling yourself a new story, of giving the circumstances in your life a different meaning so that you don't feel as much pressure anymore. You can grab your free copy in the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode and for listening to me today. I will see you again next week.